Paul that wasn't on the waiting list? Yeah, what's your name?
Ted Durin, D-U-R-I-N.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and then Stephen Arnold. Right, okay. Yeah, let's take a look and see how things work out. So hopefully this is where you think you're supposed to be. It's kind of fuzzy. Can I bother you to get up for a second so I can... Is that better? Thanks. Hopefully you're in the right place. Dana Layton's class, Psych 201A. Hopefully you intend to be at Portland Community College. If not, you're in a really wrong place. One of the things that I like to try to find out from my students is who they are. I can make a pretty broad array of assumptions about you. That's something you'll talk about in social psychology, which is addressed in the second quarter of this class. But one of the things we do is we make certain assumptions about people based on what? What kinds of things do we look at? I'm sorry? What they do for a living, appearance, frequently. I think you need one more there. Age, good. What's that? The way they act. Their backgrounds. We may not know their backgrounds from looking at them. The gender, absolutely. We're going to have a lot of expectations of behaviors based on gender. Okay. Oops. Okay. Oh, thanks. Cheers. So I'm going to have you tell me a little bit about you so that I don't have to make quite so many assumptions. I also use these index cards to, you're welcome, for attendance on certain occasions. And what I'd like you to do is to fill in some basic information about you. This is going to help me to remember who you are. Much to your chagrin, it will take me probably 3 or 4 weeks at a minimum to learn your names. So don't feel slighted if I don't know your name. It's not personal. It's just who I am. First, I'd like to have your name on there so that I can put a name to all these characteristics. I'd like to know what program you're in. So some of you are in a university transfer program. Some of you might be in an associate's degree, for example, or a diploma program or certificate program, whatever that is. What do you do in your spare time? That helps me to kind of get a little more personal picture of who you are and connect that with your name. I'd like to know why you're taking this course. For some of you, it's a requirement for your degree or your certificate program. For others, maybe it's a social science requirement. For some others, maybe you're just curious. You don't necessarily have to take this course, but you're just interested. And for a relatively few number of you, probably, you may actually be interested in psychology as a profession or as a major in college, and I'd like to know if that's the case. What that does as I review these over the next few days, it'll give me a better idea of kind of some of the areas that I want to focus more or less on as I go through the course. Okay. While you're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. My name's Dana Layton. I'm a full-time instructor in psychology here at the college. I've been here since, this is my second year here, so I started here 1 year ago. Before that, I was in South Carolina, in a rural part of South Carolina. A very different kind of cultural milieu, very different set of students in a lot of ways. but very similar in a lot of other ways. You have a lot more similarities, for example, with students in South Carolina than you do with faculty in Oregon, right? A lot of your concerns are going to be more similar, and they're going to be part of your in-group, and that's something you'll talk about in social psychology. So I won't get too much ahead of myself. I have my master's degree in social psychology, if you didn't guess already, from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. I finished there in 2004. Before that, I did my undergraduate degree at a tiny liberal arts college, 1,400 students out in a place that the New York Times referred to as one of the most remote places in the country. It's a college called Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. The town's so nice they named it twice. No, that's actually New York City, not Walla Walla, but they try to say it is. So I did my degree in psychology there. Before that, I took an associate's degree at Sierra College, which is a community college in California. And I spent a fair amount of time in the community college system in California, probably a total of about 4 years to do my 2 years of undergraduate. So I worked part-time, went to school part-time. I had a lot of the stressors and strains that a lot of you are going through as community college students, trying to balance life and academics and everything else. So I have a pretty good perspective of what it's like to be a student at a community college. I was born in New England, Connecticut to be precise. Went to high school in Massachusetts and then moved to California. And so about half of my life I was in New England and about half in California before I went up to Walla Walla for undergraduate. Finished my degree. I took my bachelor's degree in 2001. So those of you who are astute and maybe not that bad at mathematics can probably figure out that I didn't finish my bachelor's degree when I was 22 like the traditional student. So I actually started at the community college when I was 30 and started my graduate degree when I was 37. So I took a little different route. That's because I tried to go to a 4-year school when I was 18 or 19, right out of high school, and I went for a computer science degree because that's what I was doing at the time. I just had an ability with computers, and so I was actually working as a software developer, computer programmer before I went to college as part of a high school like co-op work experience kind of thing, and decided, well, I might as well go to college. I don't have anything better to do. So I went to college in upstate New York at a place called Utica College. And as a result of a lot of issues in my life, I left there after a year with a 1.62 GPA. I actually wound up withdrawing from all my classes, but that's another story altogether. So I wasn't quite ready. I think we were both mutually decided that we weren't ready for each other. They weren't ready for me, and I wasn't ready for them. Plus, I joined a fraternity and spent, yikes. And I didn't know it at the time, but I had a pretty severe substance abuse problem. And I also had an undiagnosed learning disability at the time that I didn't know about. So I had a lot of factors working against me. So I flunked out my first year in college, and then I didn't go back to the community college again for like 12 years. In that intervening time, I had what you might call a successful career as a software developer, computer programming and design consultant. So this is actually my second career. My first career, as it turns out, I was working too little and making too much money. So I figured I had to switch it around for my second career, where I work too much and make too little money. So I decided to be an instructor, professor. The reason that I tell all these kind of stories is not because I like to talk about myself, although I do. Everybody does. It's because some of you may be in a similar situation. That is, you find yourself in college courses and not doing particularly well and not necessarily knowing why. And there may be some factors working against you that you want to look at in your life. Plus, the idea that in Native American philosophy, there's something which is known as right time. Different cultures have different perspectives of time. This particular culture has a very sort of linear perspective of time where everything happens sequentially and time doesn't sort of go backwards and forwards. But other cultures don't necessarily see time that same way. Anyway, Native American philosophy has this idea of right time, that things occur in right time. And so that wasn't right time for doing college for me. And so I had to find the right time, and the right time turned out to be quite a bit later. So if you find yourself in the same situation, there's hope, maybe. You can become a college professor. I don't recommend it. No, it's not that bad. It's a good job. It's a good job. I really enjoy it. I enjoy research, and I enjoy teaching. So I'll collect those cards and pass them up. Do you have any questions about me or maybe about your fellow students? Yeah. Do I still do software development? No. What I essentially decided was I had been doing, for 15 years, I had been developing software for taking orders, tracking inventory, accounting, and really, here's the deal. You can only do that, you can only design an order entry and order processing and inventory tracking and integrated systems so many times until it just becomes the same thing over and over again. You're just in a different business with slightly different needs, but essentially underlying the system is the same stuff. And it just became boring, really. So, and I went through a major life transition also at 30, which was that I had a divorce. And so my self-identity really went through a big change at that time. And we can talk more about that when we talk about identity. But so I really had to do a lot of self-analysis and figure out who I was outside of being a husband, right? And so through a long process, it turned out that people were just much more interesting than computers. So I haven't really been tempted to go back and do that. Plus, software development and computers have kept moving and advancing, and my skills are back 10 years ago. So a lot has changed in 10 years. So I would have a difficult time really catching up now if I wanted to. Yeah. Yep. Question. Yep.
How shall we address you?
Good question. How shall we address you? Well, you can call me Dana. You could call me Mr. Layton if you're not into the whole brevity thing. Anybody? Okay, a couple. You get a couple people that pick up that reference. It's from The Big Lebowski if you're not familiar with it. So you can call me Dana. You can call me Mr. Layton. You can call me Master Layton. If you're into the anime thing, you might call me Sensei, Layton Sensei. Yeah. But you can't call me Dr. Layton because I don't have a doctorate degree. I'm not a doctor. I am a master, though. I'm a master of arts. So, yeah, Dana's fine, or Mr. Layton, or you can pretty much call me anything, and I'll answer to it. Yeah. Anything else? Oh, no, I didn't. Thanks.
That's dependent on what I call you.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm 44.
We're the same age. I can call you Dana.
Okay, good. Please do. Yeah, and different places, like in South Carolina, I noticed students were very uncomfortable calling me by my first name. They were much more comfortable addressing me more formally. What's that? I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. I picked that up as dialect when I was there, and I still use it now. Occasionally, I'll say yes sir, yes ma'am, and people kind of look at me funny. But sorry about that. Yeah. What's that? You could call me Professor. That's fine. Yep. Because I do profess. I profess way too much sometimes. But you'll let me know, I'm sure. Okay, so found out who you are. Found out a little bit about who I am. Now I'll give you a bit of a picture of the course itself. So what I'm passing out is the syllabus for the course. You're welcome. Uh-oh. Do I not have any? I've got two here. Let's see. Did I get some extras? I thought I brought some extras here. Is there one more left? I'll get you one at the break. So essentially what, whoops, how'd I go back instead? So essentially what the syllabus is going to have is how I teach the class, my philosophy for teaching the class, how it runs, how it functions. Hopefully you'll agree that it functions pretty well. What are some of my expectations, what kinds of assignments you'll have, and how I'm going to assess your performance in the class. So let me talk a little bit about each section. First of all, at the top is the course catalog description and prerequisites. That's basic information from the catalog. Then I've got a section about how to contact me, how to get a hold of me. And on the second page is the course overview, which basically gives you a picture of what the course is going to be like, what my expectations are in the course. I give you 6 goals that I hope to fulfill in the course of the class. And those are just sort of basic goals about how we're going to go through doing that. And then page 3 has how we'll accomplish those goals. I talk about the textbook, the idea that we have long classes, how you're going to go about practicing critical thinking. This isn't a memorization course. You'll actually be doing some thinking too. And actually the idea that you're actually going to even be practicing being a scientist or doing science in class. So that's one of the fundamental things that students don't always understand about psychology, is that it's a science, and it's just like any other science. You have to really do it to learn how it works. Grading and assignments is on page 3. We will have 3 exams in this course, 2 midterms essentially, and then 1 final exam. I talk about exam absences. I don't have any makeup exams, but I take care of exam absences through another mechanism, which I'll talk about in a second. Reading quizzes. Almost every chapter, I'll give you a 10-question reading quiz. The reading quiz does a couple of things for me. For one thing, for some people, they need that kind of encouragement to actually keep up on the reading. Otherwise, they'll fall behind, and they'll wind up trying to read all the chapters before the midterm, and it's not going to work very well. So for some people, it helps them kind of be motivated to keep up on the reading. It also is a diagnostic tool. It gives you an idea of whether you're having trouble with the reading. If you see that your reading quiz performance is suffering, then you may have some issues. And so I can keep track, as well as you, of whether you're tracking the reading well. The reading quizzes are, they don't actually affect your grade unless you have a low exam score. If one of your exam scores is lower than the average of your reading quiz scores, then what happens is your reading quiz score supersedes that low exam score. So it's like insurance, right? If you keep up on the reading, if you do well on the reading quizzes throughout the course, and let's say you've got 70% on the reading quizzes, and you happen to have bombed one of the exams because you're having a bad day and got 40%, that 70% from the reading quizzes is actually going to substitute for that low exam score. So it's a way of allowing you to actually have the opportunity to make up for that. Yeah, the average of the reading quizzes. Yeah. And in addition, the reading quizzes. What else do I use them for? I think that's it. Oh, what we know from learning is that studying is not the best way to learn material, oddly enough. What we find from research is repeated testing actually results in better learning than repeated studying, right? So studying, testing, maybe restudying, testing, those things tend to help more than just kind of repeated studying. So that's one way for me to get you to do some testing before you do too much more studying. Allows you to integrate that material well. The reading quizzes are a little bit different because I allow you to use notes that you take while you're reading. So that also encourages you to do more active studying rather than passive studying. So passive studying could be, well, I read through the book and I highlight the things that I think are important, and I get to the chapter and that's it. And so all you've got at the end of the chapter is really a book with some highlighting in it, which may or may not be useful to you. For a lot of people, what makes more sense in terms of studying is engaging more with the reading. So in terms of the reading notes, when I encourage you to take notes while you're reading and actually bring those notes in and use them when you're taking the quizzes, I'm trying to encourage you to actually think about what's being said in the textbook, maybe paraphrase it onto your notes. And that takes it from the textbook knowledge and puts it in your own terms. So it makes it a lot more your learning. I can't teach you psychology. None of your instructors can teach you anything. We can facilitate your learning, right? We can help you understand material, but ultimately it's you and your activities that are going to result in the learning, right? So If you have to miss an exam, here's the deal. Your final exam is a cumulative exam. About half the material will come from the last few chapters of the textbook. The other half of the material will be the major concepts you learned in the prior chapters. If you have to miss one of the two midterms, then the score on your final exam will replace that missed midterm score. But I will encourage you not to miss a midterm unless you really need to, because it's a bit of a gamble if you get to the final and you don't do so well. Yeah?
If you get two bad scores on your midterm and you get a good score on your quizzes and your cumulative, that those scores are going to happen.
So let's say you bombed your first exam. In fact, I think that's how I did the example here. You didn't do so well in the first exam. You missed the second exam. Yeah, the final exam will replace the missed exam. The average of the quiz scores will replace the low exam score. Then there's not much going to help you on that second. Whatever your lowest exam. That's one strategy. Yeah. If you know that you're going into a midterm with a particularly low, let's say you had to spend a week in the hospital, and you know you're pretty likely you're going to do poorly on the midterm, you might decide to skip it and take your chances on the final. Yeah, that's a strategy, but it can backfire too. So, let's say you get sick before the final, then you're totally out of the water. Yeah. Critical thinking. We're going to be using a workbook, which I'll talk about in a second, which will help with your critical thinking skills. And you'll also be writing a short paper, I think about 3 pages, which is, I think you won't find particularly challenging, but it'll help strengthen your critical thinking skills. But I'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the workbook. Page 5 talks about class participation. Basically, I will be assigning part of your score as a participation score, and that has 2 components. One is my subjective evaluation of your contribution to a learning community. We're all here as part of a learning community, and we're all here to sort of help each other learn. And to what degree do you contribute to that? And that'll be part of your participation score. The other part of your participation score will be your participation in 3 laboratory sessions. And these are actually going to be experiments that we'll run here in class looking at psychological phenomena. And so being here is critical for that, so that's why it's part of your participation score. Although it's also going to develop your critical thinking skills and your ability to understand experimentation and the process of experimentation. Anything else? What's on page 6? Sorry. Oh, attendance. I don't have a strict attendance policy. If you have a pattern of low attendance in the class, that will affect your participation score, obviously, because you can't be part of a learning community if you're not here. And if you're going to be late, please be as quiet as possible, as little disruption as possible when you come in. Similarly, if you have to leave early, please let me know. Because I have my own sort of insecurities, and if somebody gets up in the middle of while I'm talking about something and leaves, then that's going to start my little self-critical voice going. It's going to start telling me that I said something awful that really pissed them off, and how could I possibly do that, and what a loser am I, right? And that doesn't do anybody any good. So just let me know if you have to leave early so I don't start that self-critical evaluation. It's not that bad, but I exaggerate. Cell phones and technology. I've got a little blurb on there about that, so I'll leave you to read that. Please read the syllabus at your leisure between now and the next class. And if you have questions before the next class, let me know. The second thing I need to give you is the calendar for the course. So the calendar is separate. The reason I make the calendar separate is because the calendar changes. I plan to do certain things on certain dates in this class, but there are situations that arise that throw those plans awry. So sometimes I have to make revisions. If I do make a revision to the calendar, I will let you know, usually by email and usually in class. Yeah.
You send a lot of emails.
Yeah.
So we should keep that in.
Absolutely. In fact, who already had the email from me that I sent? Like a week ago, I sent an email to everybody, and that was registered at that time. Well, I sure had enough of these. Those of you who don't have a syllabus, I'll get that for you when we take a break in a second here. So the course calendar has 4 columns, 5 columns really. First one is the week number. I used to put dates on here, but it's a real drag every term having to change all the dates, so I just went to week numbers. You can write in the dates if you want to. What topic we're going to cover in each class period of that week. So, for example, this is a Tuesday-Thursday class, so the Tuesday class is the introduction. The Thursday class will talk about history and systems in psychology. What reading assignments are due to be prepared for that class? So you will want to, for Thursday's class, read the course syllabus and read Chapter 1. Do your best at getting Chapter 1 done by then, but I know that it's a short window to read that much material. So any exercises or things we're going to do in class, handouts that I'm going to distribute, and then any quizzes or exams or papers that are due. Now you'll notice that for Thursday, next class, you will have a reading quiz on the course syllabus. Why do I do a reading quiz on the course syllabus? Everybody hates reading quizzes on the course syllabus. For the most part, it's just to make sure that you actually do read the syllabus. Although, I'm not particularly concerned that you actually memorize everything on the syllabus. That's not my intent. So what I'll be doing is I will, on that reading quiz and that reading quiz alone, I will allow you to actually use the syllabus during the quiz. And at the very least, if you don't read the syllabus in between now and then, it'll get you used to where to go to find the information that I think is critical on the syllabus. So please do read it and be prepared to take a little quiz. So pretty much everybody will ace that quiz. So you're already starting out with a pretty good quiz average right there. Okay. Any questions on that stuff? Let me talk about the textbooks. I sent out an email last week because the textbook selection in this class is somewhat complex. The only reason it's complex is I'm using a workbook along with the major textbook. So the textbook is going to be the same as some of the other sections of this course that are taught here. It looks like this, Lefton and Brannon's Psychology, 9th edition. And you will find the paperback version of this. Now, there's 2 ways you can buy this book. You can buy this book used, or you can buy it new. If you buy it used, you're also going to have to buy the second book, which is the workbook, the James Bell Evaluating Psychological Information. This is what we're going to be using for developing your critical thinking skills. Now, if you buy the book new, what I did is I made a deal with the publisher for them to put these two together in a bundle, which is shrink wrapped together at the bookstore. And if you buy that bundle, the price of the bundle's, I think, maybe $5 or $6 more than the price of the used textbook and the new workbook. You can't buy the workbook used at the bookstore. You may be able to find it online. So just make sure you have both of those. What you don't want is this. Take this back. Return it.
I will be doing that.
This is the grade aid study guide. Now, some of the bundles at the bookstore have this together with the textbook. That's the wrong bundle for this class. Why do I say don't buy this and take it back? Because it's a mess. I had a couple of astute students in one of my sections last year who started making lists of incorrect answers in the answer keys. And so I went back to the publisher and I said, this is junk. Students can't rely on the answers in the answer key. That's kind of a good thing, though. Why?
It shows that they're analyzing what it is they're learning.
Don't trust the answer key. If you get an answer wrong, go back and figure out why you got it wrong. That's going to result in better learning than going, oh, I got the answer wrong, the answer is really this, and then memorizing that. Okay? So it's kind of a good thing that there are some errors in the answer keys. But I consider it a poor use of your money if you have to spend money on it. So what the publisher agreed to do is to, they had some other, they noticed some other problems. They went through and did some proofreading. And they actually corrected the study guide, but it hasn't been published. But I have a Word document that has the entire contents of the study guide that I'll be giving you for free. So that'll save you the money of the of buying the study guide. Okay. What's that? The workbook? You can buy it separately. Yep. Yep. Oh, there were a couple used ones?
Well, I just
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not always, sometimes they make mistakes. We're not all perfect. So I'm surprised the workbooks are available used. Although I suppose that there may be some people who buy them and then wind up never using them and then can return them. But they have pages that you're going to be tearing out and submitting to me. Now, if you so choose, you can make photocopies of the pages you need to submit to me. But there's also exercises that you'll also want to use, so you'll wind up making a lot of photocopies. So it probably isn't worth your while. By the time you're done with the cost of photocopying and the few dollars that you'll get for it used, you might as well use the workbook and submit those pages, most likely. So, as I said, this workbook has chapters in it. So chapter 1 is an introduction to critical thinking, and it's got some information about critical thinking. Please read the chapters. What will happen is you'll read the first chapter and you go, this is so simple. Why would anybody need to read this stuff? And then you'll get to the second chapter and you won't read it, and then you'll get hosed because it's going to ask you questions that you won't know the answers to. So do read the chapters. There's a little check your understanding for each chapter. I suggest doing that. That has an answer key. Then there is exercise 1.1. 1.1 has an answer key. You can check your knowledge on that. 1.2, the .2 versions are the ones you're going to be handing in to me. Okay? So the first one will be due a week from today, next Tuesday. So that'll give you this weekend to delve into careful reading. This first chapter is pretty straightforward. You probably won't take you too much time to actually do this chapter, but I think you'll find that you'll get tripped up on some things too. So, and then chapter 2 gets a little more complex. So you will definitely need to read the chapter for chapter 2. And then again, it has some checking your understanding with an answer key and some multiple choice questions, and then practice and answers to the practice. And then it has another 2.1, which has an answer key, and then the 2.2, which is actually what you'll be submitting, which doesn't have an answer key. Okay? So hopefully that'll be pretty straightforward. Any questions so far on the textbook, the workbook? I'll show you.
Just that your study guide will be forthcoming, right?
Yeah. You'll actually be able to download it from the course site. Yeah. Yep.
Are we gonna have to bring our books to class?
Do you have to bring the books to class? Generally, no. Some people find it useful if they can use the books while they're in lecture. If you're that kind of person, then it's okay. A lot of what I talk about in lecture, though, isn't actually in the textbook. I consider my lectures additional to the textbook. Some of it will cross over, and so for some things it might be useful. Or, for example, if you have parts of the textbook, parts of the reading that are confusing to you, you may want to go through and ask during lecture why, what part of this reading is confusing. And it may be helpful to have it so then you can quote from the reading and I won't have to try to figure out what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, question?
The exam's going to be based on the book and the lecture?
Are the exams based on the book and the lecture? Yes. The first 2 exams are the midterms. The final will be entirely textbook material. But yeah, the lecture will be part of the first 2 midterms. Yeah.
Are the exams essay questions?
Good question. What are the composition of the exams? Multiple choice. I think there's 50 multiple choice questions or 60. There will be some fill in the blank questions and a short answer sort of essay style, which usually only takes you a paragraph or 2 to answer. The short answer and the fill in the blank are where I usually put the lecture based questions. And for every exam, I'll be giving you a study guide, which will tell you what topics in the textbook that the questions are taken from, and also what topics in the lecture that those short answer or fill-in-the-blank questions will be covering.
Is there anything in particular in the that you would suggest we pay more attention to, like highlighted words, definitions? There's a lot of information.
Good question. How do I make sense out of this very complex textbook reading? That's a good question. What I'll tell you is yes. It's all important. The definitions will be important. And especially on the reading quizzes. A lot of the questions on the reading quizzes tend to be sort of definitional kinds of questions. So as part of your reading, while you're reading the textbook, one of the things that I'll suggest that might be useful, it's useful for a lot of people, is making either flashcards. Like if you're a flashcard person, making flashcards, and you can use those flashcards during the reading quizzes, or just making a list of definitions, words and definitions. Because one of the things we're going to be doing in this class is learning a very specific vocabulary, which is specific to psychology and specific to science. So you do have to pick up some terms and some terminology that are important because later on, especially if you take more advanced psychology courses, it'll rely on your having known that information. Some of the questions on the exams will ask you to apply the concepts, though, also. So you'll want to know something deeper than just definitions. You'll want to know sort of how these definitions and concepts relate to your own life, how they relate to the world. Start thinking in broader contexts, yeah. I'll talk a little bit more, too, about reading the textbook in a second. Other questions? I've got a few more things to cover today, but let's take a break so that I can do a couple of things. I'm going to go back and get some more syllabi for those people who didn't get a copy. And so let's take a break. Can you be back here by about 10 after will be fine. I'll give you about 10 minutes. Oh, thank you. Anybody came late that didn't get one of these cards? Okay. What I'd like you to put on these cards is at the top your name. Underneath that, what program you're taking. So whether you're in like university transfer or whatever. Any hobbies or pastimes you have. And then why you're taking this course. Okay? We'll go back to dealing with the waiting list at that point, and I'll sign everybody's slips and all that kind of thing.
What's the evening hours Wednesday night?
Wednesday night is 6 to 10. Yeah. How do I like teaching the 6 to 10 class? Well, it's exhausting. I wind up taking a lot of breaks. I think it's not an optimal learning environment, but at the same time, it allows me a lot of times to keep everything for one chapter in one class session. So it kind of conveniently packages. We're here, I'm splitting chapters between two class sessions oftentimes. So there's some advantages and disadvantages. Generally, I would prefer not to.
Would you suggest to the student, obviously not to?
If you can spread out your learning during the week, I'd say that's a good option. If, though, you have requirements for your job or whatever that don't allow you to be on campus during the day, then it's a good option. I've asked to have it be 2 nights a week for 2 hours instead of 4 hours one night a week, but that's a hurdle that I don't want to jump right now. So, yeah. The administration is a whole nother beast. Yeah. I handed out to you while you were gone an informed consent form. In psychology, one of the things that we have to do to make sure that we treat individuals with dignity and respect in our experiments is we have to let them know what an experiment is going to entail and any risks that they might have, any risks to their health or their well-being, and also any benefits that they might accrue from the experiment. And so this is an informed consent form that I passed out to you because if you so choose, and it's completely voluntary, if you so choose, you can be part of a national research project that I am part of and that the school is participating in. Last summer, I went to a workshop to learn how to integrate psychophysiology laboratory exercises into an introductory psychology course. And psychophysiology is how we can measure how emotions and thinking affect bodily states and vice versa. So the interaction between emotions, thoughts, feelings, and bodily experiences. So what this involves is 3 times during the course we'll have laboratory sessions in here. And if you choose to participate, and it's, as I said, completely voluntary, you can be one of the subjects in the experiment. It'll also allow you to contribute data toward our understanding of how these exercises and these activities benefit students in introductory psychology courses. So what they're going to be doing is they'll be looking at, they won't be looking at your specific data, but we'll take an aggregate of how students in these courses do where we're using these methods and other courses where they're not using these methods and see if there's differences, essentially. What I would like you to do between now and Thursday is to read the informed consent form. It'll tell you quite a bit about the project and what we're doing, what you're going to be required to do, and if you choose to participate, I'd like you to sign the student consent form, which is the 3rd page here. If you choose not to participate, put your name on there and write in, I do not consent, or something like that. Similarly, there's a student photo permission form. I don't anticipate taking any pictures in here, but if you agree to have your image used, then sign that form also. If for some reason you don't want your image used, then go ahead and just say that you don't consent. Let me show you a brief video about this project and what we did when we were in this project, and the kinds of things that we can do with psychophysiology in a laboratory kind of setting like this. And this will help maybe give you a better idea of what this is going to actually involve. So let me hit this right. Hopefully the sound is working. Let me make sure. Okay, should be.
Physiology being the body, so it's mind and body and mind, the two-way interaction of these things working together. If you close your eyes, open your eyes. So the what of what we're going to be doing is really a national workshop model. So we're going to be bringing these community college teachers, inviting them from around the country to come both to Itasca Community College and to St. Olaf College.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea.
So here we have the BioPack unit.
So really, what we're doing is assigning some hard data in a very scientific way to changes that you had in emotions and thoughts.
Looking at the relationship between mind and body and mind, how one influences the other.
Assigning some hard data in a very scientific way.
Psychophysiology.
You want to hook the red one up to your left leg and the black one to your right leg. Because the posture is posture.
The most important thing of all psychology, the dignity and respect for the individual is paramount. There's no shock involved in this lab ever. Nobody ever shocks anybody. And now we're getting a calibration signal. Okay, so if you close your eyes, now if you think of a picture a vivid picture of something that has lots of things in it. Now if you erase the picture and just let your mind rest and go blank. And if you'd open your eyes, okay, why don't you all come on around, and Bob and I will look at these data and talk about them a little bit, and you can see what we've got. The alpha, beta, theta, and delta components. So the brain is like an orchestra. There are different frequencies coming from different places, just like you have the French horns, and you have the violins, and you have the bass over here. The brain has different frequencies coming from different parts of the brain. Well, these are beautiful alpha waves. Let's look just at those, spread them out, and we're going to use the frequency measurement from the peak of one to the peak of the next. What's the number? 10. Right in the middle of the alpha channel. Those are real alpha waves.
And as I have mentioned before, we're very interested, in addition to these questions, into learning about any ideas you may have where this sort of classroom experience working with science and psychophysiology can be connected to the real world, the community, places where you work.
I'll talk a little bit about its application to, something, for example, like anger management.
Assessing things such as reading disabilities, learning disabilities, concentration, comprehension.
But if you can get them to understand, and I think this does, that, okay, we can generate 7 hypotheses, and we can figure out a way to prove or disprove it, I think that would give people more rigor in the way they look at just science in general.
Specifically, you're going to need to write a hypothesis that is going to be your best guess at what's going to happen when you're operating this driving simulator.
Beats per minute will go up, and music will increase their heart rate as well. The driver will have increased beat per minutes at the beginning until they get used to the driving machine.
Okay, you all have your hypothesis done? Great, good work so far. Now I want to remind all of you that you have a paper due on this project 1 week from today. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Crash.
Good, that's it, Claudia. If you escape, put those in the system. Good job!
And a crash occurred, that's why we marked it right here, and then a little bit later on, his heart rate spiked. A little bit after that, the music was turned on, and we noticed that his heart rate it continued to increase until the end of it. And we can also conclude from our hypothesis that music may increase the heart rate. And it's science because it's a measurable value. And then towards the end, his heart rate decreased. Maybe that's because he got used to it or something like that. But those are the things we concluded, and that's what we figured out for the most part. Any other questions?
Kind of jumped up a little bit, and then it kind of came down to where he fell into his base heart rate there.
See that she was nervous at the beginning, and she slowly went down to where she was comfortable, and then spiked up where the music was.
Good, you're well done.
Psychophysiology. The whole mind-body relationship and how it fits to psychophysiology, which is psychological piece, and physiology being the body. So it's mind and body and mind, two-way interaction working together.
So really, what we're doing is assigning some hard data in a very scientific way to changes that you had in emotions and thoughts.
Really a national workshop. teachers.
In a very scientific way.
The St. Wolf College. And it's science because it's a measurable value.
So I'll encourage you to participate. If you choose not to consent to be part of the actual experiments, you'll still be part of the process of learning. So you'll still be part of formulating a hypothesis, analyzing the data, drawing conclusions from the data that we've collected. It's all that the consent really is going to affect. Hi, there's one chair back there. Yeah, sure. All that the consent affects for you is whether you will actually be one of the subjects in the experiment or not. There's no risks. As we said, there's no electricity used for shocking individuals. We don't do that anymore. We used to, and it was a lot of fun, but ethics don't let us do that anymore. I'll show you some of this stuff later. Any questions after watching that? About the labs, psychophysiology, yeah?
So what you're studying is the teaching process through these kinds of exercises within the classroom? Is that my understanding?
Yes. The researchers that are running this project for the National Science Foundation, Bob Gephardt and Howard Thorsheim, they're collecting data to see how this kind of integration of psychophysiology activities affects learning in introductory psych courses. Yeah. Yep. So the more people that participate and consent to participate, the better. The only other thing that you'll do as part of the project, there's a survey that you'll fill out at the beginning of the term and then a survey at the end of the term. And those are online surveys, real easy, simple things to do. Any other questions? Oh, okay. No worries. Yep. So, anything else? We're not gonna actually run a driving simulator experiment, although that looks like a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to see if I can get some budget money to buy a driving simulator for us. We also only have one unit, so we're gonna have to collect data as a class instead of having individual groups, which would be optimal. If I could put you in like groups of 5 or 6, and each of you collect your own data and analyze it, that would be better. But at this point, we're in the beginning stages of this. I think it'll be fun. Yeah.
So just curiosity.
Yeah.
What kinds of experiments? What kinds of things like music?
Yeah. If you look at the calendar, under in-class exercises, in week 3 is the first lab, and you're going to be doing motor neuron recruitment. So basically, we're going to be looking at what happens with your muscle fibers and your muscle neurons, and how they're affected by your the intensity of your signals that are coming from your brain to your muscles, how they change. The second lab is in week 7, and we're actually going to be looking at your brain waves while you're experiencing different kind of conscious states. And the third one is in week 9, and we're actually going to be looking at reading and how reading works, really. How difficulty of reading affects how your eyes move and what kinds of movements they make and how fast they move and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. They're pretty fun. It's fun to be one of the participants. I will choose randomly from the class when I do choose the participants, usually. Okay. All right, so this is I think a really fun class. This is one of the few college classes you'll take where you're going to learn as much about yourself as you do about the material that you're studying. But since it's something that's probably new to a lot of you, it's not going to be easy either. Now, I know all of your instructors tell you this, but it's really true in this class. First of all, we're talking about a science. And so as a science, psychology is going to have its own vocabulary that you're going to have to learn, its own ways of thinking about experimentation, thinking about how to observe behavior and how to measure it. It's going to depend on your ability to make connections between different concepts, right? So, and we're going to be building on concepts. We're going to start out looking at the brain and neuroscience, and then later on we're going to see how that's affected by experience and how development is affected by brain and neuroscience. So it's going to be connected. It's not as if you're learning discrete little pieces. You're going to have to make connections along the way. And it's going to also require you to question your own assumptions. A lot of what you think about behavior from an intuitive standpoint is going to turn out to be wrong. And so it's going to ask you to really start challenging the assumptions that you've had already about your behavior and the behavior of others. Also, as you have noticed in the textbook, it's a thick textbook. You're going to be reading half of it during this quarter. And so there's a lot of reading in this course. And what I'll say is you're going to need somewhere between 8 and 12 hours of time for studying and reading in this course. That's outside of class time, right? So be prepared for quite a bit of work. If you don't do that much work, you can probably maybe get a C but to do well in this course, you'll need to do quite a bit. It's also going to be asking you to do critical thinking, but as I said, we're going to be developing your critical thinking skills using the workbook as we go along through the course. And the nice thing is that because you're at a community college, I am devoted to helping you as students. If you were going to a university, say University of Oregon or Oregon State, the faculty are too busy doing research to really work with you directly. So take advantage of my availability to you. I have office hours, but I'm also happy to meet with you outside of office hours because I know we all have busy schedules that don't always fit into my office hours. We're going to have quite a bit of class discussion, and that's going to help. And I'll encourage you to form study groups and to work together to learn this stuff better because it's not easy. And working together is oftentimes really helpful. Here's what some of my past students have said. Take 10 pages of notes per 30 pages of book reading. It worked for me. So essentially that's a page of notes for every 3 pages of textbook reading. Another student said, keep good track of your book and lecture notes, then use the little tests online that the book offers. And I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the online resources if we have time today, otherwise I'll do it next class. Those tests may not be too much like the actual tests, but they do help in getting to know what you need to look over. So you've got some online resources, like in the form of online quizzes and tests that are going to be able to help you in addition to what you're doing in here in class. Another student said, read the chapters, definitely, and take good notes for the quizzes. Take advantage of the quiz score replacing an exam score. So don't just blow off the quizzes because you think you're going to be a good student. They're good insurance to have, so I wouldn't pass them up. I'm still collecting that information, so this may be helpful to some of you who may not be used to reading this intense textbook material. First of all, when you read the textbook, most of us will have the temptation to start at the beginning of the chapter and chapter 1, and start reading, and they'll read down and they'll highlight some things, and they'll read down and they'll be highlighting some things, and then about page 4 they'll be like face down in the book, fast asleep, right? That's not a particularly effective way to read textbook material. So here's what I'll recommend to you. First of all, each topic in each chapter has a heading, and it's in the form of a question. How accurate is the image of psychology? How did psychology begin? What trends currently shape psychology? So one of the things to do is to kind of get a grasp of what kinds of information the chapter is going to be covering. But even then, I don't advise that you go in and just jump in and start reading the textbook. Take advantage of the end of the chapter where it has this thing called summary and review. Essentially, that is the chapter summarized. So it's taking all of that complex information in the chapter, condensing it down, taking out a lot of the detail, but leaving a lot of the concepts. And what this is going to do is it's going to help you start to form in your mind an idea of what the chapter is going to be talking about. So I would read that second. Then go in and start reading all the detail. So you've got the basic information. Now you're going to be filling in from the detail in the chapter, filling in all those gaps in the basic information. While you're reading, you're going to have questions, hopefully, that come up. Write those down. They may be answered a little later in the reading, or they may not. Use those as discussion questions in class if it's something you're unclear about. Make notes about the concepts that are in here. They're pretty complex concepts. And what I would recommend that you do is take what's in the book, paraphrase it in your own words, right? Change it from the author's words into your words and write those down in your notes. And now you're making that information yours instead of the author's. So you're taking ownership of it, right? You're transforming it, and that's really useful to a lot of students. These concepts are oftentimes connected. So maybe making some notes about how these things are connected. How the history of, how Plato's thinking is connected to William James, right? Sometimes people use diagrams for that. Those are called concept maps or mind maps. So some of you may be familiar with that. If you want help with any of this stuff, let me know, and I can meet with you during office hours or during appointments, and we can go over some various study tactics if you're finding that you're having trouble with the textbook reading. Okay. Let me lastly give you a shopping list. You're going to need 3 Scantron exam forms. These are going to look like I usually bring them with me. I forgot today. The 882 are going to look like this. They're going to be tall and long. This is like a half page essentially, and there's going to be 50 questions on each side, so 100 total. There's 2 sides to it. Don't get the one with 25 questions. That's the wrong one. 50 questions. And then the 815E quiz strips. Those are going to be shorter, but about the same width, and they're going to be 15 questions. Okay, and I think they're both like 15 cents each. So hopefully it won't break the bank, $1.50 or so. You'll need a number 2 pencil to fill those in. Please bring at least one of these next class for the quiz, for the syllabus. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I have time for today. I was going to go through some of the electronic resources that are available to you, but I'll do that next class. Any questions? What's that? Not now. You'll have some next class, I hope. So I'll see you on Thursday. Those of you who are on the waiting list or hoping to add, come see me and we'll talk about adding you in here. Oh, okay.
All right. I'll sit over by the door.
All right. Okay, thank you.